Welcome. Today, we're grabbing our virtual whiteboard markers and breaking down one of the most fascinating and, frankly, most misunderstood concepts in modern technology, the qubit. If you've been following the news about tech giants building quantum computers, you know there's a ton of hype out there. But today, we're going to strip away all the confusing physics jargon and look at what is actually happening under the hood.
Okay, let's just dive right in and tackle this famous, widely repeated slogan, a 0 and a 1 at the same time. I guarantee you've heard this line repeated in articles, on the news, maybe even by your friends. But I need to be totally explicit with you right now. It is completely wrong. And honestly, it's a shame because the truth is so much stranger and honestly, so much more elegant. You see, once you understand why this quote is wrong, quantum computing stops sounding like impossible magic and starts making logical sense. So let's establish what a qubit actually is. It's a fluid blend of possibilities. A qubit absolutely does not hold both answers at once. No way. Instead, think of it as a kind of leaning, a fluid mixture that has no single definite value yet. And here's the brutal catch to this whole quantum world. The instant you look at it, that beautiful blend vanishes entirely, and you're left with one plain, ordinary answer. All the real action happens completely in the dark, before you peek. And why should you care? Because that hidden blend is the entire secret to quantum computing's power. It's the reason these machines might one day design miracle drugs or crack unbreakable codes. Not because they're just faster versions of your laptop, but because they compute in a fundamentally different way.
Right. Idea 1. A switch versus a dial. Let's build a better mental model than the traditional computer bit we're all used to. Think about how this contrasts the clean, boring certainty of everyday electronics with the smooth reality of a qubit. Take a regular computer bit. Think of it exactly like a standard light switch on your wall. Up means on, down means off. It's one or the other. There's absolutely no in-between, and honestly, that's the whole point. It's clean, it's certain. Everything your smartphone and your laptop do right now is built from billions of these tiny rigid switches flipping up and down. But now, picture a dimmer dial. You know, the kind you use to slide a light from fully off, through every single subtle shade of dim, all the way up to fully bright. A qubit is much more like that dial. It can sit it off, it can sit it on, but it can also confidently rest anywhere in that smooth, continuous range between them. Actually, let's upgrade our mental picture a bit, because a qubit's in-between state is way richer than just a flat slider on a wall. Imagine an arrow that can point in absolutely any direction on a three-dimensional globe. If the arrow points straight up to the North Pole, that's our 0. If it points straight down to the South Pole, well, that's our 1. But the arrow is completely free to tilt. It could be leading mostly up with just a tiny hint of down, or it could be balanced perfectly on the equator. Now listen closely because this is absolutely vital. That tilt isn't the qubit being undecided or broken. That leaning is a real, definite, physical thing that the universe keeps track of. The precise direction that arrow is pointing is exactly how the qubit encodes that blend of possibilities. Moving on to idea 2. Looking breaks the spell. This is the catch of quantum mechanics that really messes with your intuition. Think of a spinning coin. It brilliantly illustrates the act of measurement using something we all intuitively understand. You see, you can set that qubit arrow pointing anywhere you like on the globe, but the universe has a strict rule. You can never actually see it pointing there. While our coin spins on the table, it's genuinely neither heads nor tails. It's just this mesmerizing whirl of both, completely unobserved. But the absolute second you slam your hand down to check it, the coin is forced to commit. It has to pick. You lift your hand and boom, you get a flat, plain heads or tails. The spin, the blend, is gone forever. A qubit does exactly this. While you leave it alone, it lives as that richly tilted arrow on the globe. But the absolute instant you measure it, the instant you try to read it out, it forcefully snaps to either a plain 0 or a plain 1. You will never, ever catch a qubit mid-tilt. So, if it always snaps to a 0 or a 1 when we finally look at it, what was the point of the tilt anyway? Well, where that arrow was pointing completely dictates the odds of what you're going to see. If you tilted the arrow so it leaned mostly toward up, then when you look, you'll very likely get a 0. But not always. If you balance the arrow right at the equator of our globe, perfectly sideways, you get a true 50-50 coin flip. Half the time you'll measure a 0, half the time a 1. The leaning of the arrow doesn't tell you the final answer. It tells you the exact probabilities of each possible answer. The main takeaway here is this. Reading a qubit isn't like checking a file on your hard drive. It's much more like rolling weighted dice. Dice where you secretly arranged the weighting in advance by tilting that arrow. When people say a qubit is 0 and 1 at once, all they're doing is clumsily trying to describe this highly specific, weighted blend that exists before you look. After you look, it's just a normal 1 or 0. All the computational magic, literally all the world-changing power of quantum tech, leaves entirely in the before.
Okay, idea 3, a qubit isn't a gadget. Let's clear off the whiteboard for one last major hurdle.
You see, a qubit is not some specific piece of silicon you can just go buy at a hardware store. A qubit is actually a roll. Any incredibly tiny system in nature that has two clean, controllable states can play the part of a qubit. It's the exact same idea wearing totally different physical costumes. For example, you can use a single particle of light, a photon. Light wiggles as it travels, right? If we make it wiggle up and down, we call that state 0. If we make it wiggle side to side, we call it 1. Boom, you have a qubit made of light. Or take an electron. It acts like a tiny spinning magnet. If it spins along a magnetic field comfortably, that's 0. If you flip it to spin against the field, that's 1. Now you've got a qubit made of spin. Or you can shrink down an electrical circuit, freeze it to absolute 0 so it has no resistance, and tune it so the bottom energy level is 0, and the next energy jump up is 1. That last one is exactly the kind of superconducting circuit humming inside the giant quantum machines built by Google and IBM today. Light, spin, or chilled circuits, they're wildly different physical hardware, but they're all enacting the exact same tilted arrow concept.
So let's lock in these 3 real pictures and completely leave that old light switch analogy behind. Number 1, a qubit is a tilting arrow representing a fluid blend of possibilities. Number 2, looking at it violently breaks the spell, forcing it into a plain 0 or 1 based on the odds set by the tilt. And number 3, any two-state system in nature can be dressed up to play this part. Now, throughout this entire explainer, I've deliberately been shielding you from the heavy physics jargon, but it's time to name it. That magical blend? That specific, hidden leaning of the arrow before you slam your hand down to measure it? Physicists call that superposition. And in our next explainer, we're going to crack superposition wide open. We'll look at what that blend genuinely is in reality, and we'll see the incredible mechanism of how 2 of these tilted arrows can interfere with each other, just like overlapping ripples on a pond, to actively cancel out wrong answers in a calculation. That is where the real paradigm-shifting power of quantum computing hides.
But before we go there, I have a question for you. Out of everything you've heard whispered about the quantum world, whether it's superposition, quantum entanglement, or even quantum teleportation, which idea feels flat out impossible to you? Drop your answer in the comments right now. Your most mind-boggling topic might just become the exact thing we tear down together on the whiteboard next time. Thanks for hanging out and learning with me today, and I'll catch you in the next explainer.